Imagine all of the incredible bosses in Hollow Knight Silksong. These bosses are new, refreshing, and quite difficult, but at the end of the day, you can only beat them once per save. Imagine if this is no longer the case, and getting Radiant or Damageless on all bosses is a possibility again. Imagine new and improved Pantheons, or maybe even other possibilities that Silksong's content makes possible, which may surprise us more than we could ever imagine. Welcome to a discussion video covering this very topic, the current state of Silksong, how its bosses situation compares to the first Hollow Knight, and the many possibilities for Silksong's future with bosses and DLCs. I'm Fox's Rock, and I'll be your host for this video's discussion as part of my mission to leave no stone unturned in the world of gaming. Don't worry, I'll do my best to keep this video relatively spoiler-free. Let's get straight into it, imagining the possibilities that Silksong has in its future. Let's get started by establishing some crucial context. Hollow Knight Silksong is the title created by Team Cherry, which we have all waited readily for literally 7 years. With its full release this year in 2025, fans including myself have been incredibly excited, playing this game for hours on end, and boy has Team Cherry delivered. This game takes the proven successful formula from Hollow Knight and turns it into its own beast entirely, with unique acrobatic gameplay, mechanics, difficulty unlike anything we've seen in Metroidvania history, and an industry-breaking amount of content for the best price we've seen in gaming. Long story short, it was absolutely worth the wait. It has crashed credible platforms like Steam, Nintendo, eShop, and the PlayStation Store upon its release, resulted in piracy communities praising it and unifying together to buy the game instead of pirating it, and caused record concurrent players and online activity regarding the game, which has sent ripples throughout the world. All of this is absolutely amazing, but for many of the seasoned Hollow Knight players who have gone so far as getting 112% on the previous game, there's something missing in Silksong. And honestly, given that you've clicked on the video and you've seen the title and thumbnail, I think we all know what that something is: Godhome. Before we describe why it is missing, what even is Godhome? Well, Godhome is a crucial part of the Hollow Knight Godmaster DLC, which is the third and final DLC added to the game among 2 other DLCs. This was a free DLC to Hollow Knight which added new bosses, music, quests, items, and most importantly, a place called Godhome. In Godhome, an insane amount of content was added. First off, there were Pantheons, which were basically boss rushes which could be challenged normally or at a set difficulty by adding bindings. Second, there's new NPCs, benches, and secrets all throughout. And most notably for this video, there's a special room called the Hall of Gods where every single boss in the game can be refought for free and without penalty to not only practice all of the incredible bosses in the game once again, but to gain total mastery. This added crazy replayability to Hollow Knight and was greatly satisfying to the Hollow Knight community. I can single-handedly say that this part of Godhome was a huge reason why I've enjoyed Hollow Knight so much, and honestly, it's a large part of where I am today, without exaggeration. Now that we've covered what Godhome was, I'm sure you're beginning to connect the dots on what's going on here. The Godmaster DLC added so much replayability to the game, and that's something that many players, including myself, have also desired for Silksong. And currently, although there is so much content in Silksong with 3 entire acts, a crazy amount of bosses and secrets, and an insane amount of content, there is currently no system in the game that currently compares to Godhome. As hinted at previously, once you beat a boss in your current save, there is no doing that again. Of course, there are challenges like Silksong which can allow you to do all bosses again if you have the patience, along with the possibility of replaying the game in its entirety, but it doesn't change the fact that in order to get to those bosses again, you have to redo everything you've already done, which is why none of that compares to the satisfaction that a Silksong version of Godhome would provide to the game. And as a result, players are desperately seeking an update, or even a mod, which could fill the void that a lack of a Godhome has created. Admittedly, that includes me. Now, in Team Cherry's credit, Silksong literally just released. The amount of content they pumped out in the first release alone is absolutely impressive, and is more than enough in my eyes. I am not expecting any sort of update like this immediately, as I'm sure many people could agree with. After all, Godhome was a DLC, not part of the initial release, and it was the 3rd DLC, the Godmaster DLC, which means that they've already established a precedent for adding quality content over time, not immediately. It is absolutely acceptable if the same approach is taken for Silksong. At the end of the day, I hope to convey in this video not a burning, begging desire to have a Godhome in Silksong, but to instead show what it could look like in the future and how amazing it could truly be even if it has a different form. In order to understand the new potential that Silksong could bring to the Hall of Gods and Godhome, we first need to understand the differences between Silksong and Hollow Knight. First off, when Hollow Knight first released, it had a total of 35 bosses before any DLC was added. If we consider how this compares to Silksong currently, Silksong brings to the table more than 40 bosses without DLCs. This is already more than Hollow Knight's base game. This means that the amount of bosses that could be included in any pantheons is already much larger, and getting Radiant or Damage on all bosses would be just as difficult to feat, if not more. Even more so if Silksong gets DLCs that include more bosses. Second, as all of us know, the difficulty from the first Hollow Knight to Hollow Knight Silksong has greatly increased, all things considered. And plus, healing and dodging mechanics function differently. For example, pogoing varies greatly based on the crest that you're using, masks have to be healed multiple at a time instead of individually, and without any Shade Cloak type upgrade in Silksong, dodging is much more skill based and not as free anymore. This means that even before any new mechanics are added, any possible pantheons added in Silksong would be much more difficult, as you would need to approach them in different playstyles than you would have if you were playing Hollow Knight. Third, since basically every boss and their grandmother does double masks of damage, it's likely that we may not have an Attuned, Ascended, and Radiant structure, as Ascended would just result in 4 masks of damage on even some early game bosses. Perhaps instead it would only be Attuned and Radiant. Or conversely, the difficulty could be increased through arena changes, additional phases, or time limits. Who knows? Either way, Silksong's unique mechanics and content compared to the first Hollow Knight opens up many possible doors for a new and revamped Hall of Gods. Who knows what could be ahead of us in that regard. One thing we must understand, however, is that a Godhome in Silksong likely would not be a one-in-one copy. It would need to make sense in the world of Farloom, as Farloom is absolutely not the same realm as Hollow Nest, even though it's within the same universe. To make sense of this, here are some examples of different Hollow Knight systems that were transferred to Silksong with unique twists. First, as mentioned before, the pogo was repurposed for Silksong, but with a more acrobatic approach and many different variations. Second, grubs were replaced by lost fleas, along with their associated minigames, which I love so much, by the way. And third, entering the dream world in Hollow Knight was done through the dream nail, but in Silksong it's done through the Elegy of the Deep in select locations. My point is, a boss rush area in Silksong would likely look completely different, and it may not even have the Godseeker looking over it, or share the same name, Hall of Gods. For all we know, characters like Chakra or Sherma could have something to do with it. So for now, all we can do is speculate. If I had to take my best guess on where it might be, maybe it would be in a secret location in the cradle, perhaps elsewhere near the top of the Citadel. Who knows? What do you guys think? In this next section, I'd like to share ideas on new possible additions that could be added to a Silksong version of the Hall of Gods. After watching this section, feel free to put your own ideas in the comments below. Now, there are many ways that new challenge modes could be added, or different versions of the old Pantheon's bindings. First off, as hinted at before, time limits could be added to boss fights in a Silksong Hall of Gods. This adds a unique challenge which could transform the way that it is approached by experienced players, and contribute to the acrobatic style of gameplay that Hornet has. Second, trials could be added throughout Farloom. Maybe, instead of one dedicated place, there could be secret areas accessed through a unique mandolin song, or maybe the Elegy of the Deep, to access harder versions of existing bosses, or completely new bosses in general. Third, what if unique bindings were introduced, including things like randomized charms, fighting 2 of the same boss at once, or unique arena changes that pose new challenges? Now, I know all of this is pretty unique and different from what Hollow Knight brought to the table, but I think it's all very doable. For example, there's nothing similar to Fleetopia in Hollow Knight. That was added as a reward for saving all of the fleas, in addition to the charm that you receive. In Hollow Knight, you only received the charm for it and an achievement, along with some geo, so Fleetopia's Festival of the Flea spiced up that already existing loop. You could have argued that it's super different from Hollow Knight's content, but at the end of the day, it was a very welcome addition. Same thing with the speedrunning wish, which is why I believe adding new and unique challenges would simply add more to an already incredible game. My only hope is that they aren't added in a similar way as something like arena fights were. If you don't know, arena fights are very prevalent in Silksong, and they appear to be very unbalanced and have not always been enjoyable. So I would hope that any new challenges that are added to a Silksong version of Godhome would not accidentally cause that same feeling, you know? For example, consider the High Halls Gauntlet. This gauntlet is huge, and the enemy combinations in here are ridiculous. I was personally on this gauntlet for a long time, along with many people that I played with, and this just felt like a massive, unbalanced, really unnecessarily difficult barrier, rather than an enjoyable challenge. I would hope that anything added in the Silksong version of Godhome would be an enjoyable challenge that adds to the game, rather than something like this. Either way, I'm very optimistic at the possibilities of a Silksong version of Godhome and hope to see them become a reality someday. We've covered a lot in this discussion video, and I believe there are a lot of great ideas present here, but it's worth asking, should any of this really happen? Is Silksong perfect with what it's got, or would a Silksong version of Hall of Gods make an already incredible game even better? What do you guys think? At the end of the day, Silksong has already brought so much flavor, variety, and value to the Metroidvania gaming space. To see it continue to evolve would only make its impact greater. Who knows what comes next?